I'm the director of NOSB. So that's sort of higher level decision making, big picture, and it's part of my overall role at Ocean Leadership. So it's about a 25% role right now, I'd say.
Sure. I'm Melissa. I'm the program manager. I spend a lot of my time on the fundraising, reporting, dealing with the budgets and the money side of it, and then obviously dealing with sort of larger picture program needs and all that.
Yeah, and I'm Amanda, and so I guess I'm in charge of all the nuts and bolts, as it were. So working with the regions and managing the question development, planning the finals event, that kind of stuff. So
I would just say pretty much everything is a team effort because there are so few of us. This is the team. And so to pull off what is really a year-round program and a year-round effort, we're all sort of in on everything that's going on.
I'd say it was like the last week of March probably was like the definitive, we're going virtual.
Yeah, we had known probably, I would say around March 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that it wasn't going to happen in person on the original dates. We knew that much. But for a couple of weeks, we were sort of waiting and seeing, but holding out hope that by June we could do something in person. And, by then it was just, by the end of March, it was clear that if we wanted to have a finals this year, virtual was really the only way we were going to get it done. I mean, even before our time, I think there's no record that anything like this had ever disrupted finals at all. I don't think.
Yeah. It's always been held in person. So this is the first one. So obviously the competition itself is very similar, but instead of being a one-day event, it's a 4-day event. So the students, they all arrive and have, as I mentioned before, their career event, which is a speed dating type event where they get to go around the room and talk to different mentors. And for that, we look for people who have all sorts of careers and career paths and different ages, from early career to far more established in their career, just to give a good spread of different career opportunities and paths. And so we do that, and then Friday they go on their field trips, but basically they get to see the local atmosphere where we're hosting, and get some hands-on look at the research that our host is doing or whatever. And our host was supposed to be University of Mississippi, Southern Mississippi this year. So that's Friday, and then we do their opening ceremony where they have a keynote, and we welcome all the students and highlight them all. And then, Saturday is a busy day. It's so the mornings they do the science expert briefing concurrently, kind of like on their buys, with the buzzer competition, and we do round robins. And then from there, we go into double elimination to 16 teams. And usually we have, 22 to 25 teams. So we had a little bit less this year, but usually we go to 16, and then we do double elimination, and we do that through Saturday afternoon and then Sunday. And then we have an award ceremony. So that's kind of what the typical, weekend looks like. So the students have, 4 days with other students and their coaches. And so, anyway, that's what it typically looks like. So we tried to recreate that, obviously, as much as possible in the virtual space. Given that, respecting the potential for connectivity issues, we decided that our typical head-to-head wasn't going to work or be, there would be too many issues there that it wouldn't be fair. So, so we tested the teams individually, and it was very typical to a normal competition room, in that we had like these Zoom rooms where, we still had a moderator, we still had a scorekeeper, a timekeeper, and a science judge. A little bit different because we didn't have a runner. And then there was one of us managing each of the rooms, because we had rooms running concurrently, and the students would buzz in kind of via the chat box with the letter B, and so then we would acknowledge and recognize the student that buzzed in first, and they would answer the question. And then the same thing for the buzzer, the bonus questions, as usual, they conferred over the virtual space, and the captain still responded with that. So we tried to keep it as like the in-person competition as possible, but we removed the head-to-head component.
Yeah, so everybody got the same number of questions. the same number of buzzer questions, and then of course their bonus questions depended on the correct response to a buzzer question. So everybody had the potential to have exactly the same number of questions, and we came up with a scoring rubric. And basically, starting with 19 teams, the first cut, so to speak, was looking at all of those scores against each other. So we didn't, for this experiment anyway, we didn't come up with like a head-to-head where you're going, one team's going against this team, even though you're competing completely separately in Zoom rooms. But that's something we may consider if we do this again, or have to do it again, by choice or by force.
Yep. So what we did is we went from, so this is where it was different. We went from 19 teams down to 8, and then we did single elimination from there. So we went from 8 to 4 to 2, and just based it on their individual scores. And again, in each of those sort of elimination rounds, the teams competing got all the same questions, and we did a little bit less as we moved on in terms of the number of questions, just to make the turnaround was a little faster on those. So
I think we all got the impression in some of the comments we got from coaches and students that, with so many things getting canceled, I think they were much more understanding with any bumps in our process because it was happening, and they appreciated that.
Yeah, which that's something that I think is worth noting, is that given this scenario, given that we're all kind of in this collective situation, it provided a unique opportunity for this to happen, and for us to have the students as a what's the word I'm looking for?
Captive audience.
Yeah, exactly. Captive audience, exactly. So we've had a captive audience, and also students, since they're doing virtual schooling and stuff, some of those issues with access to internet or access to resources they'd already, for the most part, figured that out with their schooling. And so that also provided a unique opportunity for this to happen, because I think we'd have to deal with more of those resource issues if we just did this in a regular time. So
that's true. Yeah, good point. I think one thing I sort of took away from that is that generation too is like that sort of virtual peer networking and virtual interaction is just something they know and do way more of than we did growing up. It's part of like their growing up experience. And so I think for them it didn't seem that disruptive of their normal social interactions, I guess, and they might have took advantage of it in ways that I think older generations don't do and wouldn't necessarily do.
Yeah, that was pretty cool to see.
People liked Craig McLean of NOAA. He's the head of oceanic and atmospheric research at NOAA, and he gave a talk from his basement, I think it is, where he has a whole collection of artifacts from his past NOAA, still within NOAA, but past careers in ocean exploration and being part of the NOAA Corps. So like kind of maritime history sorts of artifacts, and the kids seemed to really like that. And they wouldn't have gotten that in person. They wouldn't have seen all that. It would have been a completely different sort of talk, I think.
It was different, but I think we were able to capture more normalcy than we envisioned when we first started having these conversations.
We can't do any of it if we don't have enough volunteers. And so that was, even in the virtual space, we really needed the number of volunteers that we had for it to run smoothly. Our sponsors, of course. But I think the teams too, I would thank the teams and coaches because they were so flexible and for their willingness to like kind of undertake this experiment with us in a time where, there's just so much going on in people's homes and other changes and all things they're getting used to. I think their willingness to do this with us they need to be thanked.
The very first year I did it was in 2005, so this was my 15th. And interestingly enough, in 2005, we were in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and we were supposed to physically be in Mississippi this year until the COVID-19 cropped up, and then they started trying to plan for either a delayed meeting that would have been in June or in the fall sometime, and obviously that wasn't going to work out. So that's when they really started working harder on the virtual option. So the finals have been hosted all over the country. We've been to Mississippi, California, Alaska, Texas, New York, Colorado, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and I know, DC a couple of times. And I'm sure I'm leaving something out, but so it's been that's one of the things that's always fascinating, is to go and see other institutions' campuses and to meet more of their volunteers and staff there. And that's something that I definitely miss. I think everybody misses getting together with all the regional coordinators and the NOSB staff. After several years, they all kind of feel like extended family. And so it's like a big reunion, and you get to spend a little bit of time with them talking about your goals and things that you've done, things you've changed, and you get great ideas from other regional coordinators, and that's super helpful. Of the 20, I think there were 23 teams nationwide this year, and 19 of the 23 were able to commit to the virtual competition. Others, I'm sure, had, other scheduling conflicts or other reasons why they couldn't do it. Maybe they didn't have the right equipment, I'm not sure. So I think the fact that, everybody was resilient and found ways to get the job done despite the challenges, I think that was a major theme. A lot of people just like seeing young people interested in the marine sciences and wanting to encourage them and spark them. I think looking ahead and realizing that some of these youngsters are going to be colleagues in the not too distant future, and everybody would like to have competent and thoughtful colleagues, so I think it's worth making an investment at this point. But it's really competitive, and you think about some of these students they'll start when they're freshmen and they'll work their way up through their senior year. So some of them have become quite adept at not just mastering the content, but mastering the strategy behind the game. The students were much closer to us than they are when they're in an actual competition room with them. And you could hear them talk to one another during the bonus questions and during the team challenge questions. And the coordination and the leadership, the team captain would say, okay, so-and-so, you work on number 1 and I'll work on number 2. Who's going to work on question number 3? So you could see how they coordinated themselves and who took leadership roles and who was going, oh, I'll take that one, who volunteered and jumped in. And I had never gotten to really witness that before. It was really cool to watch the teamwork and the cooperation and collaboration, to see how some of these really good teams work with one another and the respect they have for one another. That was a lot of fun to see. It was quite an effort, and I really credit NOSB for the creativity in putting it together. It was more interesting, and I got insights that I didn't expect to get than I had expected to from, just virtually watching students answer questions. So it was different, but it was still rewarding, and I think the kids were all really committed to it. You could tell by their expressions that they were really paying attention. When they bring together between 23 and 25 teams from across the country, that's a huge amount of fundraising that they have to do to make that happen. So look down the line, looking for other ways to involve more teams and get more involvement for the amount of money that they've got, this might be a potential answer. So I think they were kind of testing the waters. It was a good time to test it and see how applicable this will be for other years, maybe other ways to involve as many students as possible. In the end, I would say it was far more engaging than I expected it to be, as I think everybody by now has been in on enough Zoom meetings to feel that sometimes they can be kind of dry. And this wasn't that at all. I think it was, I think we were all still on the edge of our seats.